Verzeo. Learn here, lead anywhere. Subscribe to our Verzeo channel and tap the bell icon to receive all notifications. Download the Verzeo app and get free content access.
I think it's already 11:05, so we'll start now. A very good morning to all the participants over here. I am Akshaya and I will be the host for today's morning. So Versio takes the pleasure to welcome you all to the second episode of the GMAT webinar series, Simplifying GMAT. So before proceeding with the second episode, let's have a small recap of our previous episode, which was on overview of GMAT. So the episode started with the introduction of our speaker, Mr. Rohit Sen, and he walked us through why should a candidate go for MBA, what is GMAT and the structure of the GMAT exam, then the GMAT exam options, the most frequently asked questions in GMAT, and the preparation time required for GMAT, the number of attempts one can give for a GMAT exam, and also how GMAT is conducted during the COVID-19 period. So to check out more, you can, to know more about the previous episode, you can check out our YouTube channel, and the video link has been posted in the chat. People can, the candidates can check that out as well. So now, coming back to the present episode, our speaker, Mr. Romit Sen, who is an IIM Ahmedabad alumni, is currently taking the chair as the Director of Product Management at Riversen. He also has an experience of 14 years in technology consulting and design of leading enterprise products with almost 10 years in US. So now he'll be taking over the session. So over to you, Mr. Sen.
Thank you, Akshaya, for that nice introduction. Good morning and welcome everyone to our episode 2 of this Unraveling the GMAT series. As Akshaya has already told that this is the second episode, you can go and watch out the video in the on our YouTube channel on the first video. The first video, of course, talks about I spoke about why to do an MBA in the first place, and we also got into what is the GMAT, what is the exam format, how do you prepare at a high level, and how can Versio help us in that journey. Today we'll get into a little bit more on simplifying the GMAT for you. What exactly is the format? What is a computer adaptive test? I had spoken about the CAT. The CAT here is stands for something else. It's called computer adaptive test, and we are going to talk about how that behaves, right? And we are also going to look at some of the a little bit in details about some of the sectional aspects, right? The quant and the verbal, right? What is the format and how do you go about preparing for it? So some ground rules we will. I'll go through the presentation, run through the presentation in about, I would say, 45 to 50 minutes, and we'll try and take some questions at the end. Whatever time we are left with, about 5-10 minutes, we'll take some relevant questions from you. So having said that, I will now share my screen and we'll get into the details of it. Let me know if you're able to see my screen, all of you. Akshaya, can you confirm? Can one of you please confirm if you're able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, it's we can.
Okay. So this is the format of the GMAT, right? I had presented this in my previous webinar as well, right? So there are 4 sections currently. The analytical writing assessment, which is an argument analysis and communication in the form of a critique, sort of an essay that you need to write in 30 minutes. It's scored on a raw scale of 1 to 6. There's an integrated reasoning section with 12 questions. And those 12 questions are of, let's say, different types. There's a 2-part analysis, multi-source reasoning, graphical analysis, and some tabular analysis of data. For that also you get 30 minutes and it's scored on a raw scale of 1 to 8. Now, these two sections are, of course, these are mandatory. You have to take them, but these do not count towards your score of 800, right? The GMAT is scored on a scale of 200 to 800, and these two scores currently do not contribute towards your score of 800. Okay. That does not mean that you are not careful about it, or you do not put in the right amount of effort into doing your best on these sections, right? But currently, the only two sections that are scored are the quantitative and the verbal section. In a nutshell, the quantitative is about 31 questions with two types of questions. One is a problem solving question, and one is the DS or data sufficiency question. You get about 62 minutes to solve 31 questions. That leaves you about exactly 2 minutes per question. For the verbal section, you get 36 questions. They are of three types: reading comprehensions, critical reasoning, and sentence correction. And you get about 65 minutes to answer those 36 questions. That makes it about a minute and a half per question, right? Seems like a bit tight. A lot of students ask me, is it enough time on the verbal and the quant section? Of course it is. Otherwise, the GMAC, the council that administers the GMAT exam, wouldn't have stipulated this time for each question. But with the right amount of practice, you can definitely crack it, right? The scores for both verbal and quant are scaled on a scale of 6 to 51, right? So as I said, once again, the quantitative and verbal sections are the only two sections that contribute towards your score of 800 today. The AW and IR section do not contribute towards your score of 800. So we need to be extra careful. We need to put all our effort into the quantitative and verbal section. Of course, as I said, AW and IR also need to be done carefully and properly. We'll get a little bit into the quantitative and verbal. We'll get a flavor, a very high level flavor of what the quantitative and verbal section is today, right? So before we get into that, I was talking about this. I was talking about what is a computer adaptive test, CAT, right? What does that mean? An adaptive test means that the difficulty of each question that you encounter is somehow determined by the way you answered the previous question, right? So the moment you start taking the GMAT, right, and the verbal and the quant sections are the two adaptive sections on the GMAT. Okay, let's say you start off with the quant section. The first question that you will get on the quant section will be somewhere in the average question, right? Question of, let's say, 500 level, right? Of course, I'm doing a mean. As I said, it's scored from 200 to 800. So the mean would be 500. 500 level question would be somewhere, let's say, an average level difficulty question. So GMAT is going to throw you a 500 level question. Now you get that correct. What does GMAT do? It'll adapt to it. It'll learn that, okay, you are competent at a 500 level question. It is next going to throw you a 510 level question, say. You get that correct. Next, the GMAT is going to throw you a 520 level question, and so on and so forth. Let's say you keep getting questions right till a point you reach, and it does not mean that if you just get, let's say you get 5 questions right in a row, and you are right now at a 600 level question, and you get just one question wrong. It does not mean that the algorithm is immediately going to regress you to a lower level. No, it is going to be, it will watch you for a couple of more questions, like a string of questions. If you get wrong, that's when it tries and adapts itself to understand that your level of competency is probably not at that level. So what do I mean by that? For instance, you have been getting questions right all the while, and you climb your way to a, let's say, 680 level question. Now the GMAT throws a 700 level question at you, and you are not able to get it correct. What the algorithm is going to do is they're going to throw you another 700 level question, and you still get it wrong. They'll throw you another 700 level question. Now you get it wrong. Now you've gotten 3 questions wrong at a 700 level. Now the algorithm understands that your highest level of proficiency, right, is probably not 700. Then it will try and throw you back to a 680 or 690 level question. And let's say that you get it correct. that's when the algorithm is trying to regress to your appropriate level of proficiency. So the algorithm is trying to gauge that your level of proficiency does not lie at a 700 level, but it probably lies at a 680 or 690 level. What does that mean for the exam? Let's say you do the same with quant and you do the same with verbal. Eventually your score is going to be what? It's going to be a 680, for instance, 680, 690, but it's not going to be 700 because you have not answered any of the 700 level questions successfully. That is how the GMAT is adaptive, right? So people who are getting these great scores, like 750, 60, some people get a perfect 800 score. Those are the people who are not just getting, let's say, more questions correct, but they're also getting more questions correct at a higher level, right? So your score is actually a function of the number of questions you get correct multiplied by the difficulty level. It's basically a function of two, and will I have elaborated that in the next slide. But what does that mean? Like, of course, one of the major things when a computer adaptive test, how it adapts to and how it regresses to your highest level of proficiency, as it does that, the first question, when the corpus is smaller, makes a much bigger impact, right, on your score, on your proficiency level. So initially, if you get your questions wrong, let's say if you get your first 20, 10 or 10, 12 questions wrong, then the GMAT is going to throw you, the entire GMAT algorithm is going to regress to a much lower level, because remember, it has started from 500. Now, if you get 500 level questions wrong, the GMAT is never going to, let's say, progress you to a 600 or even 650 level. It's probably going to stay at a 550 level, 500, somewhere between 500 to 550. So your chances of getting a higher score at least is much more. At least if you want to get to a 600 level, get those first 10, 12 questions correct on both sections, on both your verbal and the quant section. Make sure that you do not make silly mistakes, oversight errors, calculation mistakes in the first 10 to 12 questions. That's the pro tip, right? In order to get, because the test is adaptive, you do not want the test to think that you cannot handle 500, 550, 600 level questions. And those are the questions you'll probably get in your first 10 to 12 questions. So the pro tip is try and do the first 10 to 12 questions on verbal and quant very, very carefully and get it correct. So that now the GMAT is throwing you 600 and 600 above level questions, right? So that is what the computer adaptive test is. If you have any questions, you can throw it in the chat section. We'll probably take it up later on, but let me currently run through the PPT. So as I was saying, I've already alluded to this point that the score on the GMAT is a function of the number of questions you have got correct multiplied by the difficulty level. Right? What does that mean? I've actually explained it. Because of the adaptive nature of the exam, the GMAT score is going to be derived not just from how many questions you have gotten correctly, but also the difficulty level of the question themselves. So somebody who is getting a 700, 750 is not just making more questions correct, not just marking more questions correctly, but they are also getting harder, much more harder questions. They're getting questions at a 700, 750 level, right, on the GMAT. So answering higher level questions will obviously yield a higher score than answering the same number of easy questions correctly, right? So as I was saying, always remember the first point on this slide, that the difficulty level as well as the number of questions both are important for you to score a higher score on the GMAT. Right? So in order to reach to the difficulty level, you need to make sure that you get the first 10 to 12 questions correctly. The more you get correct in the initial stages, I'm not saying not just the first 10, 12, more than that, the more you get correct, GMAT is going to regress you to a higher level of difficulty. So your chances of getting a higher score is much higher. Time management is very, very important from the perspective of course, the score, right? Avoid going too slow in the beginning, right? Even if you're doing the quant section or the verbal section, do not go very slow in the beginning. Just because I have told you that now you have to do the first 10, 12 questions very, very carefully, does not mean that you spend 30 minutes on the first, let's say, 10 questions of quant. For the first 10 questions of quant, you should be spending 20 minutes because per question is 2 minutes. We have done the math earlier. That does not mean that because you want to put in more effort, make sure that double check your answers and make sure that you haven't done any calculation mistakes. You spend 30 minutes on the first 10 questions on quant, right? You have to be cognizant of the total amount of time available to you, right? Maybe you could spend, instead of 20 minutes, you could be, let's say, spending 21 minutes. A minute is what probably you can take at max, let's say, even if you have delayed it, right? But remember, the first 10 questions of GMAT are also not that difficult because the GMAT gets you started, as I said, with a 500 level question. The 500 level question is not that difficult. 500, 510, 520, you gradually climb the stairs of the GMAT difficulty level. Those questions are not that difficult. So ideally, if you practice well, if you're well prepared for the exam, the first 10, 12 questions should not take you a lot of time. Even if you were to be very, very careful and, as I said, doubly check your answer, make sure you haven't done any calculation mistakes, you haven't done any silly errors, oversight errors. A minute is probably max that you can afford, because remember, after you have gone through the first 10, 12 questions, the level of difficulty is going to shoot up a little bit, right? It's going to get a little more harder. So you need the time later on. You need to sort of you need to spend those extra whatever time you save in your initial questions. You got to spend that extra time in more difficult questions, tackling them later in the later part of the exam, right? So avoid going too fast, right? As I was saying, if you go too fast and get your initial questions wrong, now the GMAT is going to throw you lower tiered questions. That one thing that you got to remember, that if you go too slow, right? If you go very, very slow, are you guys still with me? My connection was a bit unstable, so I'm not sure if you can still see my screen or hear me. Akshay, can?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yes, Mr. Romit.
Yes, great. Thank you. So if you are going too slow, what happens is, let's say you have got 31 questions and as I said, 31 questions, 62 minutes. Now in the last 2 minutes, you have got 3 questions remaining, right? Ideally in the last 2 minutes, you should only have 1 question remaining. But let's say in the last, you were slow. You were slow to begin with. You could not pace your exam properly. And in the last 2 minutes, you only have 3 questions left. Of course, you'll have a timer on the top right hand corner of your GMAT screen, which shows the amount of time left for that section. So you see 2 minutes on that, and you see that you are, let's say, on the 29th question right now. So you have to get the 29th, 30th, and 31st question correct, right? Or you have to complete it. What would be your strategy? Some people might say that many students, what they end up doing is they'll probably spend those 2 minutes to get the 29th question correct, right? Because they'll need time to get the 29th question correct. If you are going in the right, let's say if you're taking the exam right, most likely your 29th question is going to be somewhat difficult, right? Because right now you're playing at a much higher level of difficulty. It's okay, but what happens is there is a much higher penalty on the GMAT if you do not finish a section, right? So now you have got the 29th question correct, but now you haven't finished your section. The time runs out, and you still haven't answered the 31st, 30th, and the 31st question. There is a much higher penalty to that than maybe, let's say, just taking random guesses on the 29th, 30th, and 31st question. So I would say, if you are stuck in ideally you should not be. The best case scenario would be to not be stuck up in that position, not be in that position in the first place. But if you are at all in that position, the best thing to do is probably do, let's say, random guesswork, or take your best guess based on the question, and complete the section, because there's a much higher penalty on not completing the section than, let's say, than doing a random guesswork and getting it wrong, right? So therefore time management is really important. Finish the section and try and get them correct. If you at all do not have time, at the end, just somehow finish it by doing random guesswork. So that is the pro tip, right? It's obviously not the right way to do it, but if you are stuck in a situation, that is the strategy that you should be taking. Now we talk about some of the very high level tips for your GMAT preparation. These are things that have been advised by the MBA.com website, the official GMAT, GMAT website. So most of them advocate that, most of the students, based on the data, crowdsourced data that they have gathered, the GMAT has found that approximately 3 to 4 months is the right time to prepare for your GMAT before your exam is due. Start your preparation at least 3 to 4 months before that. Right, most test takers they report a minimum of 8 week study, so that's again like a minimum of 2 months, but that's a minimum, right? So the sweet spot sits somewhere between 3 to 4 months, right? If you're somewhat familiar with underlying GMAT exam content, but you're the best judge of how much time you need to prepare. So everybody's preparation time is different. Like it also depends on at what level of proficiency on quant and on verbal you are right now. I've seen students taking the GMAT in 7 days and getting a score of 750. I've seen students get to the same 750 score, but having taken 6 months to do it. There is no, let's say, extra for you to just study 7 days and get the 750. The credit is same in both cases. It's just that everybody's journey is different. Somebody might have been out of, let's say, touch. They might not have done high school quant and, let's say, haven't dealt with solving grammatical problems, right? Verbal problems for a much longer time, and they're out of touch. So they need that much extra time to get back on the saddle and ride smoothly. So as I said, each of your path journeys are different, will take a different amount of time, but approximately based on my experience of teaching GMAT for so many years, I have seen that approximately 3 to 4 months is what most students end up taking. Ideally, you should not, let's say, start with one section at a time. It's often, I've seen students starting off with the quant section. People who think they're, let's say, probably weak on the verbal especially might want to start off with the verbal section. It's your choice, right? Practice pacing, as I just elaborated the importance of time management, how it is important to pace yourself correctly throughout the GMAT, right? And finish the questions, finish each section. Otherwise, there's a massive penalty on not finishing each section. Of course, use the official GMAT practice starter kit, right? Which is going to give you 2 exams, right? And they are free computer adaptive exams. I often say that you might want to take one of those first exams before the start of your preparation to gauge where exactly you stand right now without any preparation. What is your level? So if you take an exam, the first of those exams in the GMAT starter kit, you might score a 500. And let's say based on your target, let's say program and target school, you find out that your target school needs a GMAT of 700. So that's a 200-point journey that you have to make. And it's very easily possible. A lot of students make that. But that means you have a very clear understanding, a quantitative understanding of the journey that you need to go through. So it's very important to gauge yourself initially and then start your journey. Some students do not do that. They don't want to be discouraged by the initial bad score. I understand, and I have seen many of my friends, my juniors, my students not take that initial test, and they still ended up doing exceedingly well on the GMAT. So, but I would still say it's a good strategy to first take one of the first the exam number 1 from the practice starter kit without any preparation to gauge your initial preparation level. Of course, expand your preparation with more questions. The official guide practice exams offers you 4 more extra tests, but those are paid for, right? You can buy them. I would highly recommend that this is the investment that you definitely make, because there are multiple test prep companies which are very famous, and I can name drop Manhattan. You can talk about Princeton Review. You can talk about Kaplan, and each of them have a series of tests for their on their charter, right? They offer as part of their product, right? They offer series of tests. But I would still advocate the GMAT official practice is those exams are very close to the actual GMAT exam, and they'll give you a very close indication of what your score could be. right? So as you towards the end of your preparation, at the end of, let's say, at the very tail end of your preparation, around the 4th month or 3.5 months, whenever you are planning to take the GMAT, so in the last 1 month you are supposed to take all these exams, and that is going to give you a very clear indication of what is your what your ideal score, what is the closest approximation to your real score on the GMAT is going to be. uh, the official guide, by the official guide, if whenever you're preparing for the GMAT, you need to have the official guide, you need to have the verbal review, and you need to have the quant review. These are the 3 books that you cannot do without, right? And they're absolutely must. You could also, I mean, the AWA practice and IR practice, I would say they are optional. And as I said, some people do not want to invest into the AWA and IR so much, because after all, the AWA and the IR do not contribute towards your score of 800. So you might want to practice it from free resources like GMAT Club. Some people do not want to spend that money, and it's completely up to you. But definitely you have to have the GMAT official guide, the verbal review and quant review. Those are absolute must. And as I said, take full length test towards the end of your preparation. So if you have planned your GMAT, let's say in the month of July, for instance, July 2021, throughout June, you should be taking a number of these practice tests. You should be taking a test, let's say every weekend, whenever you have time, and sit through the exam. Take it like an exam fully. Don't pause it in the middle. Take it like you would take your real GMAT exam. Time yourself on a timer and take it exactly like it, the way it should be. Of course, these test prep companies, they'll have their own simulation environment where you can take it. The timer would be shown and exactly would mimic the exact GMAT environment. So take a full length test without interruption, and with the mental makeup that this is the real GMAT. So that's how you can evaluate yourself. Do an assessment after the exam and course correct continuously to get better, right? So those are the sort of high level tips on how to prepare for the GMAT overall. As I said, the resources that you would need are definitely these 3: the GMAT official guide, the GMAT verbal review, and the GMAT official guide quant review. You cannot do without these. Some of the other ones, specifically, if I talk about, let's say, sentence correction, I also have found the Manhattan Sentence Correction book to be very, very helpful. It is considered to be one of the best books for sentence corrections. If you're talking, if you want to prepare specifically for critical reasoning, the Power Score Prep Bible for critical reasoning is considered to be one of the best for critical reasoning. So these are the 2 additional books on top of the official guide, the 3 official guides that you can purchase and you can sort of get access to and prepare from there. Otherwise, as I say, the one resource that you definitely need is your determination and discipline. GMAT is the entire exam is like a marathon. It's a 3.5, like more than 3 hours exam. And you need to have a mental makeup of sitting through the entire section at one shot. Like, of course, you will get some breaks in between, right? After you finish your quant, you get an 8-minute break to take your verbal. And before you take your quant, you get an 8-minute breaks after you have done with your AW and IR. But what I'm trying to say is, you need to build, let's say, muscle memory to sit through that entire exam. It's like a marathon, and you should not lose focus, because what happens is, once you're through your AWA, IR, you take an 8-minute break, you take the entire quant section, you are mentally fatigued, right? At that point, you really don't want to basically go home and sleep. I'm being very honest, but the thing is, you still have to go through the verbal questions. You have to go through an entire set of 36 questions on the verbal, which comprises of reading comprehension, critical reasoning skills, and sentence correction. And you have to still be at your very best, very alert, and bring all the skills that you have learned during your preparation to the game to get all of those questions correctly, to eventually get a good score. I'm not saying all the questions correctly, even the best of the scorers get a few questions wrong, but basically bring your A game and still sort of triage the entire verbal section. So it's building a lot of muscle memory there. Let us now talk about the quant section a little bit in depth. Today we will talk a little bit about the quant section and the verbal section. I'm not going to talk about the AW and IR a lot. We'll talk about those in subsequent webinars maybe. So the quant section has is very application driven. I mean, the entire syllabus, if you want to call it that, all the topics that you will find that GMAT is going to ask questions from, they're all that you have learned in, let's say, standard, I would say 8, 9, 10, right? GMAT is not going to ask you calculus. It's not going to ask you, let's say, complex algebra. It's not going to do that. It's not going to ask you, let's say, integration, differentiation, very complex trigonometry, nothing. These are all topics that you have learned in your standard 8, 9, 10, right? However, it is very much application driven, right? So at a high level, the arithmetic topics, algebra topics, geometry and word problems are things that I've listed. These are, as I said, very elementary level, nothing that you already do not know. Maybe many of you are working for, let's say, a number of years, so you haven't practiced these problems, and that is where it takes time to get back to basics, to brush up those concepts and to apply yourself. But of course, if now the question is, if GMAT is testing you on something that is so basic, let's say standard 8, 9, 10 level quant, of course, GMAT is going to make the questions a little more twisted. The level is still going to be the same, but the application levels will be higher. So they'll make the question difficult by difficult wording, or by, let's say, convoluting the question in different ways. And we'll take a look at an example of how they do it. So as I said, the quant section, there are two types of questions. One is the problem solving question, and one is the data sufficiency question. Problem solving accounts for about 17 to 18 questions on the quant section, right? Again, it could be any topic, and the format is that you'll get a question stem, and you'll get 5 answer choices, A, B, C, D, and E. And you basically solve the question stem, the information given in the question stem, and you choose the right answer. Data sufficiency accounts for about 13 to 14 questions on the GMAT, on the quant section. Again, it could be from any topic. How is the format like? It has a question stem, and it has got 2 statements, statement 1 and statement 2. Now your answer choices, A, B, C, D, and E, are based on whether you can answer the question based on the 2 statements, right? What is the sufficiency? And we are going to talk a little bit more about it in this next couple of slides, as we do a couple of examples, example questions, just to sort of pique your interest and see if you get a hang of it, right? So this is a sort of problem solving question that you might expect on the quant section on the GMAT. It says if A1 to A is a 4-digit number, right? Nothing complicated there. With the digit A in both the thousands and the units place, as it is demonstrated, what is the value of, it should be what is the value of A, not AA, just the value of A. I think there's a repetition here. If the number is divisible by 6. So I have a poll opened here for you guys to sort of solve the question. So I'll give you a minute, right, to take a shot at it and maybe fill in your answers. And after that, we can see how you have fared. So you can start now. Okay, I can share the results. If you're able to see my screen, yeah, I have, I think 53% of the class has responded that the answer is D, 6, and that is in fact the right answer for, yeah, I see about 4 responses for C, 4 responses for B, 1 response for A, and 1 response for E. Okay. People who have got it correct, of course, congratulations. People who have not got it correct, no big deal. It's a simple question, and I'll quickly go over it. Let me first correct this. I don't like this sitting here. This is A, of course, right? So in order to answer the question, the theory or the concept that you need is very simple. You need to know the divisibility rules, right? So when is a number divisible by 6? You could say that a number is divisible by 6 when it is divisible both by, just give me a second over here. Yeah, a number would be divisible by 6, right? When it is divisible both by 2 and by 3, right? And if you can individually identify when is a number divisible by 2 and 3, we could easily tackle this problem. So what does it mean when a number is divisible by 2? That means the number is an even number, right? And also the units digit of this number, right, is going to be either 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8, right? Of course, it cannot be 0 because if A is 0, then it will be 0, 1, 2, 0. In that case, this is not a 4-digit number, and we have this is not a 4-digit number, and we have said that A1 to A is a 4-digit number. Therefore, 0 is out of contention. So the only 4 option that I'm left with is 2, 4, 6, and 8. Now we are going to look at what does it mean when a number is divisible by 3. How do you check for the divisibility of 3 is you add all the digits on the number, and if that number is divisible by 3, you can say that now that the entire number is divisible by 3. So I can say that 3 plus 2a, if I add the digits, right, 2 plus 1, 3, and plus a and plus a. So this comes to 3 plus 2a. If that is divisible by 3, I can find out if the entire number is divisible by 3. And if I can confirm that, then I can find out that number that is both divisible by 2 and 3, that is then going to be divisible by 6. So what I can do is I can substitute the numbers here, like 3 plus 2 into 2. What does that give me? 7, right? So I'm basically putting these numbers. I've taken 2 and substituting here. Is this divisible by 3? No. So I'm going to do 3 plus 2 into 4. This is going to be 11. Is this divisible by 3? No. I'm going to do 3 plus 2 into 6. This is what? 15. Is this divisible by 3? Of course it is divisible by 3. And the final check, although I probably don't need to check because the answer is going to be 1, but just for making sure that I do all my calculations, this is 19. Is this divisible by 3? No. So basically I have found one number. This is 6, right? If I substitute 6 here for A, I get a number 15. I get the sum of 15 here, which basically means that this is now divisible by 3 as well. And of course, with A being 6, it is also divisible by 2. So the ideal, so the number is 6, 1, 2, 6, right? So my answer should be D, right? So we can take a systematic approach to, as you see, the right answer, and people who have gotten it, I am hoping you have followed this approach, right? So I assume people who did not get it now have got a hang of it. So this is a problem solving question that will come across in the GMAT. So you have to solve for it and get to the right answer. It is as simple as that. Now we'll take a flavor of the data sufficiency type of question. Now, before I open the poll and ask you to solve for it, I'll just walk you through, people who have not seen a data sufficiency question. I'll walk you through the question and give you the how to answer it, give you a sense of how to answer it. So in data sufficiency question, you're always asked a question and then given 2 pieces of information. You'll be given a statement 1 and a statement 2. Your job is to then find out whether you can answer the question from the given information, right? Now you'll have 5 options, A, B, C, D, E, again, just like you had in the problem solving section. But each of these stand for something on the data sufficiency questions. Now A stands for the fact that if statement 1 is sufficient enough to answer the question and statement 2 is not, right? If statement 1 is sufficient enough to answer the question, then the answer will be A. B, you will choose answer B if statement 2 is enough and statement 1 is not. Now, if either of the statements are not sufficient enough to answer the question by themselves, what you do is combine the information from both these statements. And then if you are able to solve the question, you can then mark the answer as C. What does D stand for? If statement 1 is sufficient enough to alone to answer the question, and statement 2 is enough alone to answer the question, each independently is sufficient enough to answer the question, you can mark it as D. And you can mark it as E if you combine the two information, right? If you combine the two information, either you find that it could be C, right? If you combine the two information, you are able to answer the question. Even if you are not able to answer the question after that, then you can mark it as C. Then you can mark it as E. So E in some way is C complement, right? E is once you figure out that you combine the two information, you are not able to answer the question, you can then mark it as E. I see people have already started. Somehow the distribution of the answer is somewhat similar on the problem solving and the data sufficiency question. Yeah, it's probably a little worse in the data sufficiency question. More people got the, okay. I'm still seeing that answers coming in. It's interesting. The 32 people in here, 20 of you have voted. I'll give you a few more seconds. You can go ahead and put in your vote. And even if you're not able to, you have to go with some option. So this is the dilemma that you're going to be faced with on the real GMAT. There is no skipping questions in the middle of your test. You have to mark something and move on. Okay, I am going to end the polling right now. I'm still seeing answers coming in. I have to end it right now because we have to move on with the presentation. Okay, so if you are able to see my screen now, again, I see a large majority of you have gotten the right answer, which is B here. Some of you haven't gotten, of course, is 3 or 4 people have responded to C and D. Okay. Okay, let me quickly walk you through this. People have gotten it correct. Again, congratulations. I hope you have followed the right procedure. Although this is not even a real GMAT question. This is an example question, and something of this is super easy. And by saying that, I don't want to discourage any of you who haven't gotten it correct. But basically, what it is asking is X greater than 10, right? In the first statement, it tells me that X is greater than 9, right? So on a number line, if let's say this is 0, this is, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, somewhere here is 9, let's say, and this is 10, and let's say this is 11, right? What it tells me is it's asking me if X is greater than 10, right? If X is in this region. Now the first statement is telling me that X is greater than 9. Okay, pardon me for this. This Scribble software can be a little buggy at times. It can, the spike, please disregard the spike. So what it tells me that X is greater than 9, but does that mean that X is greater than 10? I don't know. X could be 9.1, X could be 9.5, or X could be 11.5. Who knows? It's nowhere written that X is an integer. So you can't assume here that X is an integer. If it's not written, you can't assume that it's an integer. So in that case, in one case, X is not greater than 10. In this case, it is greater than 10. Can I then sufficiently answer the question that if X is greater than 9, X is also greater than 10? No, I cannot. So this is not sufficient to answer the question by itself. Okay, now let me take a look at this second statement. And remember, most importantly, the biggest tip that I can give you in the data sufficiency questions is when you are looking at the statement number 2, forget whatever information you have gathered from statement number 1. You have to only look at statement number 2 all by itself. Okay, this is a very difficult thing to do. It's called context switching. You have just now solved something, and things will not be as simple as this one on the real GMAT. So you've really taken some time to solve the first statement, and you have come to some conclusion. Oh, sorry. immediately now you have to switch contexts, right? And you have to now look at the second statement all by itself. Okay. Now it tells me here that x is greater than 11. Okay. So this is 11. Sorry. So now it says that x is greater than 11. Now, if x is greater than 11, I can definitely say that x is definitely greater than 10, right? Whatever value you take here, 11.1, 11.2, 100, or some positive infinity, it will always be greater than 10. So I can say from this statement alone that this is sufficient. So if my answer statement 2 is sufficient enough, but statement 1 is not, then my answer should be B, right? So people who have gotten it correct, well done. And I'm hoping people who did not get it, now you have a hang of how to solve data sufficiency questions. And most of the time when you're initially starting off, it is not about solving the question so much, but it is probably understanding these answer choices, which I find a lot of students have a problem with, right? They actually solve it correctly, but then they're not able to figure out what is A stand for, what does B stand for, what does C stand for, and so on. So, and of course, you have to be aware of some of these traps that the GMAT lays for you. So many of you might have assumed that if x is greater than 9, x is probably an integer, right? So it could be 10, right? So see, point is, even if I'd assumed that x is an integer, even then x could have been 10, but does that mean that x is greater than 10? X is equals to 10 is not greater than 10. So even there, I cannot say for sure that statement 1 is sufficient enough to answer the question, right? So people who have, even if you have thought of x as an integer, if you have done that mistake, even then you should not think that statement 1 is sufficient. Even then it is not sufficient. Okay, so then moving on, we'll have a quick look at the verbal section. We are sort of running out of time. So on the verbal section, we have three different types of questions. One is the critical reasoning, and you'll get about 9 to 10 questions. So what is the format like? You'll get a short passage, usually fewer than 100 words, and then answer a question related to the argument, right? For example, you might be asked to identify an answer choice that strengthens the argument, weakens the argument. You might be asked to draw an inference or conclusion from the short passage, right? So that is how critical reasoning questions are. Sentence correction is a very important section on the GMAT. It's a very scoring section on the GMAT. If you get it correctly, 12 to 13 questions you'll get. So you'll get a sentence which has a certain part underlined, right? Beneath the sentence, you'll get 5 answer choices, again, A, B, C, D, E. And the first answer choice is the same as the one that is underlined. So the original underlined section. And the B, C, D, and E would be some different variation of the underlined section. Now you have to identify if the original is the best choice, if it is correct grammatically, right? If it is right, then you might select the answer choice A because that repeats the original answer choice, or you will have to find an answer choice that fixes the original problem with the sentence. Now the problems could be like different types of problems: agreement of the subject with the verb, parallelism, modifier error, pronoun errors. So we'll have to we'll take a look at a question, sample question, very small question. And of course, reading comprehension accounts for about 13 to 14 questions on the GMAT. Each reading comprehension question is based on a passage, right? It could be a 200 word reading comprehension passage. Now, after reading the passage, you'll be given to answer 3 to 4 questions, right? So the passage can be really dry sometimes. It can be really complex and dry. It can talk about social sciences, anthropology, humanities, biological sciences, right? You don't, like, somebody doesn't need to have specialized knowledge on the subject. What you do need to do is you need to be able to answer. I mean, you need to be able to understand what the primary objective of the author is, and get the high level, I mean, get an understanding of what is that they're trying to say, right? As I said, some of the words that or the phrases that are the technical details in these questions can be mind-boggling a little bit, right? But you need to cut the fluff, cut the fat part of it, and just get the core essence part of it. So we'll take a look at a sentence correction question, for instance, and I don't have a timer on this, but feel free to put your answers in the chat window if you want to. Sorry, scroll is a bit buggy today. Is it
Mr.
Akshay?
Sen?
Yes.
Yeah. What's the problem?
No, we don't have a live poll on this one, Akshay.
No, yeah, we don't have the live poll for
So
this.
I asked the participants to put in their answers on the chat itself if they want to. I'm not opening the chat, but what is the sense that you're getting? What is the overwhelming answer that you're getting?
As of now, the answers, I haven't received any answers in the chat yet. I'll keep you posted once I get any.
Okay, we'll give it a minute maybe.
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, I will go through the problem. While larger banks can afford to maintain their own data processing operations, many smaller regional and community banks are finding that the cost associated with upgrading data processing equipment and with the development and maintenance of new products and technical staff are prohibiting. So this is a classical question that tests your knowledge of the subject of the agreement of the subject with the verb and parallelism. So these are the two concepts that this particular question is testing: agreement of the subject with the verb and parallelism. What does agreement of the subject with the verb means? That means if you have a noun that is singular, you should be using a verb that is singular as well. And if you're using a nouns that are plurals, you should have a verb that is plural. Now, this is talking of two types of costs. It is talking of the cost of upgrading the data processing equipment and the cost of development and maintenance of new products, right? So there are two types of costs. Therefore, I should be the only answer, the noun that I should be using is the costs, not cost. Therefore, I can definitely weed out answer choice A. I can weed out answer choice D. The only three other answer choices, definitely the original answer choice is wrong. So A is weeded out, D is weeded out. So I'm left with all the answer choices that have costs in plural, COSTS in plural. Now I'm left with costs associated with, costs arising from, and costs of. Now I have to also apply the concept of parallelism. What does that mean? It means that if I'm talking about costs associated with, right? And if you look at the later part of the sentence, you will also see that it has a phrase costs associated with upgrading data processing and with the development. So basically it means that there needs to be a with in the beginning as well. Okay, the with is the okay part. So if I combine my two findings, I need something that has costs in plural and something that has got with, which is the one answer choice that has both, the answer choice B, right? So having the with, upgrading, and with the development, these are two parallel phrases, and I have to keep the parallelism intact. So keeping parallelism intact and agreement of the subject with the verb, agreement of subject verb is one concept that is tested, and parallelism that is tested. Okay, so if you are able to sort of triage this problem in a very logical way, you'll be able to apply both these one after the other and come to the right answer choice, right? So for this, you need, of course, a lot of practice. As I said, practice from the right materials, from the right sources, and you should be good. So that brings us to the end of the webinar today. I don't have any more specific slides to show, but we can talk about how Versio can help you. Of course, we have the offering that will take you through sort of 80 plus hours of coaching, right? This captures all the essential details. I'm not going to sort of bore you with the details. You can reach out to the Versio team. You can go to versio.in/gmat coaching to get all the details. Fill in your reach out to the sales team and talk to your Versio representative, and they'll get you started. Akshaya, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah. So the thing is, we have, as Mr. Romit Sen said, like we have 80 plus hours of training, and then we provide smart tips. It's like you could have seen from the webinar as well. And apart from this, we provide special guidance to all the takers of the course. So we have this special EMI offer, zero cost EMI offer, and this is the launch offer that we are providing. It's around 25,000, and the pre-registration amount is 7,000. And for the subsequent months there would be zero cost EMI, and this is the launch offer that we are providing. So, and you would also be given the advantage of joining our Versio GMAT community as well, where your doubts could be solved by our experts. So please do join us and reach out to us if you have any doubts. So now we are available for the question and answer session. If Ms. Romit is also available to take.
Yes, let us take a few questions, right?
Yeah, I haven't received any questions as of now, but if anybody
Oh,
has, like,
that
please.
is
Yeah, I think like most of the question and answer session went in the quants and data sufficiency itself.
okay. Are there no questions regarding any strategy, any about the GMAT exam? We received a number of those in the first. I think people are getting a hang of the GMAT exam already, which is good news. The
Yeah,
lesser questions we get about the GMAT format and the exam, the better it is as we
better,
move
correct.
along the journey.
Yeah.
So we'll give it a couple of more minutes for anybody to chime in with a question.
Hi,
Yeah.
Romit. Hi, Akshaya. I just have a quick question regarding the mode of delivery of these classes. So, is it going to be online or offline?
It's going to be online. So may I know whom I'm talking with?
Deepshika this side.
Deepshika. Okay. Hey, Deepshika, this is going to be an online live classes. It would be handled by Mr. Romit Sen itself.
And it'll be conducted over the weekend or?
Yeah, it will be conducted over the weekend.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, the online delivery mode is probably the most efficient, and considering that travel is a problem right now. But to be honest, the online delivery mode also doesn't have any disadvantage at all. As you saw, you could use a whiteboard, Microsoft Whiteboard application, and you could do all the scribbling there. So it is basically like you would sit in a class and your teacher is sort of scribbling on a massive whiteboard. So that is the same sort of tools that I use.
Hello. Yeah, you're right, Mr. Sen. Yeah, there are no any disadvantages per se when it comes to online sessions, I guess. I think people prefer that nowadays, right? I'm not wrong.
Yes, yeah, and so many people from all different parts of the world can are joining these sessions these days.
Yeah, right. So I think like we haven't received any questions yet. So I think like we can end the session here. And before doing that, I would ask the participants to kindly fill the feedback form. The link for it would be posted in the chat. Hello. I think everyone would have got the feedback form as well. So kindly fill the feedback form and then we can end the meeting here.
Sure. So before
Yeah.
signing off, one last message from me. I wish all of you the best of luck for your GMAT preparation. I don't know when you're going to take the GMAT, but essentially, if you're aiming for, let's say, the incoming class of 2022, right, you got to be done with your GMAT by, let's say, August or September of this year. Wish you all the best for your GMAT preparation. And if you feel that you need any help and Versio can be of any use, can be of help, do reach out to us. As our motto, as you see, is we don't stop at the GMAT prep. We'll sort of guide you and hold your hand all the way to your first step into B school, because we will also help you sort of eventually take your do your essay prep and the sort of interview prep and see you all the way to your first steps in the B school. So reach out to us and we'll be glad to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rumithan. Thank you. Once again, thank you to all the participants. Just a gentle reminder, please do fill the feedback form and we can end the session here after that. The meeting would be live for another 5 more minutes. Another gentle reminder, the next episode would be happening on next Sunday at the same time, 11 a.m. So you can join us for the next episode as well. The registration link for that is being provided in the feedback form. So please do check out the link and we welcome you. We are hoping to see you back for the next webinar.